It's like a Spectrum game with more colors. It's Enduro Racer on the Atari ST Show, episode 12. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Atari ST Show. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're going to be talking about Enduro Racer.
Ooh.
Now, Aaron, I know you're not much of a motorcyclist.
No.
But you are sort of a enduro driver.
That's true.
You endure many miles on the road. So tell us, for those of us that don't clock the amount of miles that you do, what is the secret to maintaining a positive outlook on just endless amounts of miles on the road?
You know, it's funny because I did a couple hundred today, actually, Bo, before I came down to sit down the show. It's something you get used to. I will say that. I'm sure a long distance trucker could give you better advice than I can, but I will say, number one, always have something good to listen to. I listen to a ton of podcasts. I listen to Pixelgate and You Don't Know Flack. I listen to Sprite Castle. I listen to Us sometimes if I get really bored. Wrestling, whatever I can find. Horror stuff, anything I can get hold of, I listen to, and that helps a lot. And if you don't have that, always have some music standing by, because then the third defense is the radio, and you never know what you're going to get depending on where you're at. It could be all religious stuff or country music or something you're not into, and then you're boned because then you start getting tired. Second thing I want to advise is when you're out there on this long stretches of road, make sure you know where all your bathrooms are at, man. I hate to go down this road again, but this is vitally important. You got to make sure that you know exactly where you can go in case things go down. And along those lines, if you've got a long trip, make sure and this is coming from me, by the way, make sure you're careful with what you eat. Because the last thing you want to do is be in the car with stomach cramps or worse, bad times, boat.
Yeah.
And then this seems like a no-brainer, but man, make sure you're not tired when you're driving, because that's the absolute worst, is when you're half asleep at the wheel and you've got to be somewhere and you don't have an option just to pull off the road and sleep. So I try to make good and sure that I've gotten a really, really good night's sleep as far as as best I can do, given my limitations of sleeping, before I go out, because it can get ugly. And then one last thing I would do is, for the love of God, drive defensively, because people are insane. I just saw a statistic today in America that said the accidents are up like 28%, drunk driving's up. A bunch real high, and like driving while high is up. And the last thing we need in this country are people that are screwed up behind the wheel, because even when they're stone cold sober, a lot of people can't drive. So you got to be very careful to watch your surroundings, Bode.
Excellent advice all around, Aaron.
Also, one last thing. When you see a dirt pile ahead of you, make sure you pop a wheelie before you hit that crap, or you'll fly up in the air like a handstanding idiot, and then it's the old crotch buster on the way down.
Have you ever been airborne in a vehicle?
Oh God, yeah, tons of times. Oh yeah, I used to deliver pizza. I'd hit this like railroad crossing, like the Duke boys, and launch my old Grand Am high into the air. So yeah, I've done that many times. But by the way, the Grand Am don't work no more. I guess I could pretty mention that.
All right, Aaron. Well, let's talk a little bit about Enduro Racer now.
Excellent, Boat. There he goes. So let's talk about Enduro Racer.
All right. So first of all, Aaron, do you know where the word enduro comes from?
I thought it was short for endurance.
Yeah, well, it seems like that. But did you know there's actually a sport called enduro?
No, I didn't know that, man.
Yeah, and there's a special type of motorcycle racing that is actually called enduro racing. So it's not like what I always thought, which is just what you thought. When you ride a motorcycle for a long time, it's an enduring feat. Let's call it enduro. No. According to the old wiki, the term enduro traditionally refers specifically to time-kept events that require competitors to maintain a prescribed mile-per-hour average over varying terrain. Competitors are moderated by a series of secret timekeeping checkpoints along the race course, and they're penalized based on their arrival time to the checkpoint. So it sounds exactly like this game, except in real life you don't have a timer ticking down. That's a secret number that only the people at the checkpoints know. How's that strike you?
That sounds like a horrible idea. I mean, you'd have to be out of your mind to do that, wouldn't you? What if you get tired? You're on a bike of doom.
Well, it's funny because these sorts of races are sort of the equivalent of rally racing in the automotive world. You and I have gotten to know rally racing better than we used to know it by playing a bunch of games on European computers. And this is sort of like the motorcycle equivalent of that, where it is these courses are deliberately put on both public and private roads, on road, off road, wherever they want to go. That's how enduro racing works. So
they're on public roads.
Yeah,
that doesn't sound like a good idea. This is a horrible idea.
Now, of course, this game was released way back in 1986 in the arcades. It was published by Sega Enterprises, a Japanese outfit, and this is basically the sequel to Hang On. Hang On was I would call it. Would you call it the first motorcycle racing game of note?
Well, no, I would not, because in fact, me and Brett on ARG covered a motorcycle race. Well, I guess that's not really racing; that's more jumping. But I don't know, because I'm pretty sure I remember some of the old mechanical arcade games that let you race bikes around a course. So, but I mean, this is the first one I remember in the video game age.
I'm going to call this
that was straight up.
I'm going to call this the first motorcycle racing game of note.
Okay.
Because there were other games like Fawns and Stunt Cycle and stuff like that, but those were not racing games.
Yeah, fair enough.
So and what do these games bring to the table other than motorcycle racing? Well, it gave you a motorcycle to sit on. And that, of course, was the big selling point for Hang On, where you're leaning to one side or the other. On Enduro Racer, you are doing the same thing, but instead of a traditional racing motorcycle, you have what resembles a dirt bike. Did you ever know kids with dirt bikes back in the day, Aaron?
Oh, yeah. My neighbors had them. And they used to ride them around their yard, and eventually they'd ride them around the street. Those little noisy little things.
Yeah. The dirt bike scene,
they loved them.
The dirt bike scene is alive and well here in my neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
Kids tear through the neighborhood at fantastical speeds, making fantastical noise. I was one of these kids. I wanted a dirt bike, but I was smart enough to know that I never even asked my parents, because the answer would be a resounding no. But anyway, Enduro Racer I would call it a moderate hit in the arcade. I know that I never saw as many Enduro. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen an Enduro Racer in an arcade before, but I've seen plenty of Hang-Ons and Super Hang-Ons.
Yeah.
Did you have a similar experience?
I would agree with you 100%. I saw plenty of Hang-Ons, Super Hang-Ons that had. Well, the one I saw the most would be the one that just had the handlebars strapped to the front of the arcade machine. But I did see plenty of the ones that you actually get up on and ride,
Mm-hmm.
And that was the gimmick. Because it's funny, even back in the day, these games I didn't think were. I mean, it's not the kind of game I would put a ton of money in, because it didn't seem like that big a deal to me. I mean, the element that was awesome was the actual getting on the bike. And it's the kind of thing that every kid tries at least once. And then if you go in there and rock around like a moron, then you're like, screw this, I'm done. But some people had a knack for it, and they'd be the ones that would play it a bunch of times. I would be the kind of kid, and I remember distinctly riding one of these things for the first time, sucking, and then moving on. But I did play the one with the handlebars like way more, because I was better at that one.
Yeah. And so anyway, this game eventually made it to many systems. This game was released on mostly the computers, the Amstrad CPC, the C64, the Thompson. Both lines of Thompson got a release on this.
Yeah.
And the ZX Spectrum. This game was also released on the Sega Master System. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But this game, a little bit of background about this game. This game was published and released by Activision. Activision kind of had a deal with Sega. They released a lot of their arcade ports onto the home computers at the time. This came out a year after the arcade machine, so pretty quick turnaround time, released in 1987. This was programmed by, on the title screen, Giga Games. I guess Giga Games was actually the moniker of a guy called Ian Morrison. And Ian Morrison did a couple different titles for the Atari ST. He did Cisco Heat. I've not played Cisco Heat, and it looks like another
I've seen the arcade
game.
version. Yeah, it is.
Chase HQ 2. He did
Yeah.
the ST port. Outrun. I hope the Outrun on the ST was better than the Amiga version. And he also did Road Blasters.
We need to try all those, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like the only non-racing game that he released, that he programmed on the ST, was a game called Sidearms, which appears to be some sort of a horizontal mech-based shooter. The music in this game, which is extremely memorable, is our buddy David Whitaker. David Whitaker, one of the most active composers of music. I guess in this case, maybe he was more of an arranger, because I think he was basically just arranging the arcade tune for the ST. But I mean, he did hundreds and hundreds of games. Looks like he's listed here on AtariLegend.com as having provided the music for over 100 games on the Atari
and he
ST.
works all sides of the street too.
Yeah, he did.
Like, he turns up everywhere.
That's right. Plenty of Amiga, plenty of C64, plenty of Atari ST. Beyond that, there's really not that much going on in terms of the background of this game. Of course, it is it's a port of the arcade machine. The thing that strikes you first, well, actually, I'll tell you the thing that struck me first. The thing that struck me first about this game was that I was unable to start the game.
That will strike you violently.
So
yeah, me too, by the way. I had the same problem.
When you load up a computer game, a lot of times you're greeted with the title screen that says either press the fire button to start the game, or maybe you'll have an option screen right off the top, especially if you're in your 8-bit computer line, what says press K for keyboard, J for joystick, space to start, or whatever. In this game, you get nothing. You get the loading screen, and the loading screen starts. It's basically, you see a man on a motorcycle. It could be a woman, a person on a motorcycle with the Enduro Racer font behind them. And if you wait long enough, you get this sort of sparkly star effect.
Yeah, like people are taking pictures, paparazzi.
Right. This you can immediately tell that this Activision was very proud of this port, because their name is featured prominently, almost as big as the Enduro Racer title itself.
Yeah.
On here. And then the demo starts, and the demo will play for about 30 seconds. Then it takes you back to the title screen. And I went through and I pressed every single key of the keyboard. I was mashing down on the mouse buttons. I was hitting the button on the joystick. I could not get this game to start. Now, were you able to figure out how to get this game to start?
I did figure it out. But I mean, it was after you had put that message in Discord.
Right. So
yeah, because I wasn't expecting what I saw. Let's just put it that way.
What you have to do is you have to wait for the starry background to show up. Okay. And then you have to hit the space bar or the joystick button. And when that happens, you get a drop down menu right out of like a Sierra game or something, where you have file, game controls. You have all these different options that drop down, and you have to go up to the game menu and choose start game. It's very, very odd. I don't know if I've ever seen a game start in quite the same way. Have you?
Yes, I believe the Amiga version of Marble Madness, like, there's some Amiga games that require you to do that are like that.
I think that
it's goofy though. It is. I mean, I don't hate it, to be honest with you. I like it as an interface. It's not the worst. I like, once I figured out what was going on, I liked it. But yeah, it was strange.
I think that this is one of the growing pains that the computers were going through at this time. At this time, the mouse was a brand new interface.
Yeah,
and they wanted to work the mouse in. And I can see why. The thing that makes it dumb is the fact that you have to hit a key to trigger that menu. They should have just put the menu up at the top to let you know right away, this is how you're supposed to start the game.
Yeah. That's one of the ones where if you pirated it, you might just sit there for a little while, wonder what's going on.
Yeah. And so, okay. So now we've gotten into the game proper now. Okay, so this is a motorcycle racing game, and the differentiator between Enduro Racer and say Hang On is the fact that this does not take place on a traditional racing track. Hang On is basically pole position on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
This is a game that takes you through many different styles of terrain. This is a game with full of obstacles on the road. Not only do you have to contend with other motorcycles, traffic, but you also have mounds of dirt on the road. There are rocks, there are logs, there are all kinds of things that are trying to get into your way. You're also traveling through the woods. You're traveling through open plains. You're even traveling through these long, miles long bridges where there's nothing but water on both sides of you. So you are your job as the Enduro Racer is to basically just reach the next checkpoint. That is the point of this game. You are racing. It is not a start to finish race. This is a game where you're trying to get to the next checkpoint. If you get to the next checkpoint before the time runs out, you get extended time based on the amount of time that you had when you reach the checkpoint, and then you're racing on to the next checkpoint. Is that how you would sum this up, Aaron? Did I leave anything out?
I think that's exactly how you do it.
So, Aaron, you have played this game in the arcades.
Correct.
You have played this game on the ZX Spectrum. What were your first impressions of playing Enduro Racer on the Atari ST?
Well, I like the opening screen, and like I said, once I figured it out, I like the pull down menu. I like seeing all the options laid out. There are options. You can have a joystick or mouse control, which is nice. I use both. I tried both to just be fair. You could actually take a picture. And which is weird, but you can take a picture of your race.
That is weird. I never did that.
Oh yeah, you could do it. Well, if you're playing off an image, it says like, hey, your thing's right protected. It's like, well, yeah, no kidding. So they gives you a couple of different things. Now, the game starts up. I'd say it runs at an okay clip, but right away I'm just looking at this thing, and it's graphically, it is plain Jane. I mean, it really is. It's not like the arcade that much, if I'm honest. If you play the arcade version of this, and again, I'm not the biggest fan, but it's exciting. There's a lot going on, and your guys, it's just the area is more entertaining to look at. I mean, these areas are just blank, with the bare minimum environment to get you by. Your character is blank looking. All the other guys are just kind of like just generic versions of yourself that you're racing. This game doesn't have a lot of they didn't exactly go crazy on the color palette, if you know what I mean. In a lot of ways, this game reminded me an awful lot of like what you would play on the Spectrum. Like if they juiced up the Spectrum, and I'll give you a few examples as to what I mean by that. If you look at the way it's drawn, the detail on the actual drawing of the dirt coming off the bike as you move, or the bike itself, or the landmarks, they're the kind of art they use is very reminiscent of sort of the very detailed looks that you get on the ZX Spectrum. But the ZX Spectrum's got an excuse for having flat, lame colors. This just sort of basically like colorizes ZX Spectrum graphics, and the result is just sort of blah. I mean, did I think this game was like a super dud? No. It was an okay game, mundane, nothing special game. It controlled okay. The gimmick on this is when you hit a jump, you've got to sort of be popping a wheelie as you go over. Otherwise, you're going to land, and your guy's going to come off his seat, and you're going to lose time. You're going to slow down. So that's the whole thing of the game. Stay on the road and hit the jumps right. Eventually, you come to obstacles in the road that you sort of have to avoid. I don't know how far you got in this boat. I think I got a couple times. I got to the part where you're over the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where I got too.
I never beat the game. That's for sure. I mean, I found it difficult, but you do transition from environment to environment. But I mean, when you transition to them, it's always a letdown. You know, it just nothing looks that impressive, and it just doesn't like it runs. I would say the frame rate's not all that great, if I'm honest. I mean, it's passable, but it's not what I would expect from a system as capable as the ST. And I mean, this game embodies a lot of what I've seen with the ST. Just sort of someone did the minimum job to put out this like sort of run of the mill arcade port over to the ST. So what did you think? Am I out of bounds here, Boat?
Well, I always, whenever I look at an arcade port, I always go back to the original arcade version and I say, what is it about this game that made it special? And to me, what makes Enduro Racer special is the technology used on the arcade board. This patented Sega scaling technology that allows you to scale sprites, backgrounds, and track objects at a very rapid, smooth rate. It's a very impressive effect. It's what's used.
It's eye-catching.
Yeah, it's what's used on Space Harrier. It's what's used on Afterburner, and it's what's used on Omega Racer or Enduro Racer. In the ST version, you don't get any of that. You get, gone are sort of the various heights of the track. Gone are the sort of the way that the screen the screen shifts when you jump. In the original version of Enduro Racer, when you jump, the track actually shifts on screen. It shifts up and you see the horizon shifts. And it makes you believe that you're jumping really, really high in the air because of it. In the ST version, you don't get any of that. Of course, there are easy things like, various layers of parallax scrolling in the backgrounds on the arcade version. You have, your enemy, the other racers, they look different. They have a different color scheme. In the Atari ST version, you don't get any of that. What you end up with is, like you said, a very flat looking, uninspiring, relatively choppy motorcycle racing game with poor hit detection, with enemies, or not enemies, but other racers and other track objects just popping up out of nowhere. And there's really just not a whole lot of fun to be had playing this game. Even if this game was new, when this game first debuted on the Atari ST, if you were coming off of playing this in the arcade, every home computer user has a buffer set up saying, okay, I know that I am not going to get a 100% arcade experience playing a home port. Everybody knew that. Nobody was thinking they were going to play, but you have to, the developers of a quality arcade port, they have to take something, at least something from the arcade game and translate it to the home if they want it to be successful. So they could have just taken one thing, like say, okay, we can't do the speed of the arcade version, but what we can do is we can bring over the variety in terms of the other motorcycle racers. Maybe we'll put in a couple different models of car, and that will sort of overcome this gap. We'll be able to bridge this gap. Or say, okay, well, we can't really do anything with the other characters because we're limited with the amount of moving sprites that we can. But what we're going to do is we're really going to go crazy with the variety of the settings, what you're going to see alongside the track. Okay. Well, they didn't do that either. Okay. Well, one more. Maybe what we'll do is we'll really work hard on this engine to make it run as smooth as we can, and we'll make the collision detection spot on, and that will forgive any of the graphics failings. They're 0 for 3. They're 0 for 3 in this game. And so it's really hard to find anything to recommend about this game, especially when you put it side by side with either the Amstrad or the ZX Spectrum version. Because it's not as if this game is Mr. Colorful. Now, is it more colorful than the ZX Spectrum version? Yes, it has more colors. But it moves at precisely the same clip. I'm pretty sure the animation, the animation count the frame count is exactly the same as the ZX Spectrum version. So
Yeah.
if you're telling me that this 16-bit powerhouse can't compete with the lowly, Z80 processor, that is a big, big problem. And it shows you that, the developers of Enduro Racer were programming for the lowest machine possible. And they were hoping, I don't know if this same outfit was responsible for the ZX Spectrum version. I can't remember, but I would not be surprised at all if they coded this version just to dumb it down for the ZX Spectrum version and the Amstrad version, just to get out of the way. Now, I can tell you with 100% certainty that they were not involved with the production of the C64 version, because the C64 version takes all of the problems with the ST version, and they add the extra bonus of it looking like triple butt. It looks horrible. Did you look at the C64
I
version
did.
here?
I'm not gonna say appalled, but I was upset when I saw it. Yeah, it looked rough.
It is bad times if you are an Enduro Racer fan and all you got is the C64.
One thing it does occur to me, Bo, as we're beating this thing down. This was released in '87, which means it was probably in production in '86, which was roughly not too long after the ST was released. So this could have the same failings that a lot of the early Amiga games had, which are just trying to come to grips with what you have available to you, trying to learn how to program on the system. It is an early title. I'm not trying to give this thing a pass, but it's an early title that maybe they didn't quite have all the kinks worked out. What will answer my question on this is you mentioned the flurry of other things that this guy worked on, all those other games. I want to try one of these, an Outrun or a Road Blast or something that came out a couple years later. This is a plea to the selection committee. I would like to try something that this guy did a few years later and see if he gained a better grasp of the computer he was programming for than what we're seeing right here. I mean, otherwise, then I can maybe give it a little bit of a pass. I mean, as it stands now, if this was a full price piece of software and you went out and picked it up, I mean, in '87, I guess, like I said, it's passable. It's passable. That's pretty much the best compliment I can give
the
it.
Game, the game is playable. It's 100% playable.
Yeah,
it's 100% playable. It's also 100% boring.
Yes, it's not one you would go back to over and over. Even if you're a big motorcycle fan, I mean, there's not a whole lot of like motorcycly feel to it. If I'm honest, it's just it's just the same old standard crap.
Now,
you're passing guys. There's only a couple different enemies to give or other racers to even go around. There's a truck. There's clones of yourself. I don't think I saw anything else.
Yeah, and so we know from past interviews that we've read of developers, computer developers at this time, that it's not as if Sega was releasing the source code or any sort of art or anything like that. They basically just gave the studio a copy of the arcade machine, or in some cases they had one arcade machine that all of the studios just sort of shared. They'd shop it around. And so a certain amount of leeway could be given due to that. I'm not saying, and you never know. Again, it's the same old saw about we only had 6 weeks to get this out the door. You never know.
You never know.
The only thing you can judge is the final product. I do think, since we've talked about so many of the other ports of this, that we should take a look at the Sega Master System version of this game, Aaron. So obviously the minds at Sega decided to go a different route when they ported an Enduro Racer over to the Sega Master System. Now, could the Sega Master System do a competent version of the arcade game? I believe it could.
It did other racers of that.
If you've ever played Outrun for the Master System, that's one of the best conversions of the system.
Yeah. So it's definitely possible.
But what they decided to do instead with this one was they decided to go the isometric route. So you have in this game, this is your classic Zaxxon perspective you are trying to move through a track, and it is a 3D experience. So when you hit ramps, you get height from the ramps, and your track, you don't really have turns. There are no twists and turns. You just have forks that you're trying and obstacles to avoid. I fully believe that this is a result of them, of the folks at Sega taking a look at a little game I like to call Excite Bike and saying, how can we leverage this arcade title? Boy, is this the longest? Oh, is this the is this an only a 30-second clip?
This is the promo, yeah.
Okay.
You know what this reminds me of a lot? Is the cool part of Paperboy.
Yeah.
You remember that part where you go through the obstacle
That's
course?
right. It is very, very similar to Paperboy. So yeah, imagine if Paperboy was on a motorcycle and he was going off ramps at motorcycle speed instead of bicycle speed, and that's what you end up with. And so this is, and I went around with this on the Mister, and I was very, very impressed with the Enduro Racer because it ran fast. And it was very, very smooth. Now, you could say, and somebody brought up on the Discord, that if the Atari ST version would have looked like this, it would have gotten scorched in the magazines, because the magazine writers would have looked at the ZX Spectrum port and said, hey, you can do what looks like the arcade game on the Spectrum. Why can't you do it on the ST? And maybe there's some truth in that. Maybe they shied away from that because it was, it was already out on the Spectrum, or maybe they knew that the Spectrum version or the 8-bit versions took the same arcade viewpoint. But to me, the Master System version shows a greater amount of imagination and sort of working with the hardware that you have to achieve the best result that you have.
Yeah, it's funny because this is that. Again, we're talking about 87 here, and this is when you're just now moving up people from the 8 bits to the 16 bits. And I think maybe part of it's just, like I said, aside from the fact that maybe they didn't quite get it, I think they just assumed that people were going to be satisfied with it because it was still better than what they'd been used to, So maybe there was that aspect of it, and it is. It's okay. It looks better than 8-bit, more or less. It plays better than 8-bit, more. But I mean, I think only time will tell as we dig deeper into the ST. When we've played games very similar to this on the Amiga that were just as crummy, or worse. Action Fighter comes to mind, that horrible game. But so, it happens, and sometimes these arcade ports, and again, this is not the strongest arcade game to port as well. And so maybe, I don't know how big a hit this was. Maybe it was a minor hit. Maybe they just gave it minor attention. There's plenty of different angles.
Yeah.
But I mean, overall, just playing it now in 2022, it ain't one I'm sure as heck not coming back to.
Right. The Discord team did agree with you. We got some reviews. Photon Storm writes, I think it's important to remember just how early in the ST's life this game was released. Clearly, the developers weren't used to even having a mouse available, and the game strangely features a drop-down menu system and even mouse controls, which actually do a passable job. I want to take a break from Photon Storm's review here and talk a little bit about the mouse controls.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that.
If you're doing mouse controls, don't make push forward on the mouse, accelerate, and pull back on the mouse, decelerate.
Yes.
That's crap, and that's no good. And that's what this game does.
Yeah, and the thing is, the mouse controls, once you get past that, they're not bad.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
But I mean, I use the mouse most of the time, but that sucked. Especially when you got mouse buttons sitting there.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
So
yeah.
Back to Photon Storm's review. Graphically, the game is weak, especially when compared to the arcade. There's no real sense of speed. All the riders look identical, and there's just none of the breakneck fun that made the arcade so great. The Spectrum version does a much better job than this. The omission of sound effects is truly odd. It's music or silence. On the plus side, at least the first level is very forgiving, but nearly everything destroys you from level 2 on. A real shame considering what comes later in the ST's life, but perhaps a symptom of the time. 3 out of 10. And Salem OK writes, I remember getting a cracked copy of this game and being pretty excited as I already had Super Hang-On, which was an excellent conversion. Boy, was I disappointed, even by my rather low standards of the late 80s. The joystick controls are extremely stiff. The collision detection is inconsistent. The colors are C64 bland. Ooh, ice burn. This game moves better than most early racers. It came out in 1987, and the music by David Whittaker is really catchy, among my favorites from him, actually. But that's about it. 4 out of 10, mostly for the music.
I will say, I want to add two things.
Okay,
here.
man.
The music, and I love Dave Whittaker's stuff, right? And I'd heard this theme was like the bomb.com. Listen, to me, the arrangement sounded fine, but the music was no great shakes. I mean, as sounding like you could put this, like you could have done better on any.
This sounded exactly like a 128K Spectrum game.
That's
exactly. It had that AY sound chip. That's
you stole my thunder. That's exactly what I was going to say. Like if you put this on, like I didn't play the 64 version, but if you put this on there, and you may, the game might stink, but you're probably going to get some awesome tunes out of it. I mean, this is the ST, the highly praised musical machine, and I want to hear some of this super duper killer music on it. Secondly, the reviewer brought up a good point there. When you play the game, you get music and no sound effects, which is goofy. If you look at the Amstrad version, I just had a cup of coffee with it. It's got sound with no music, and I debated on which one I preferred, because one of them you just get when you get the music, but I want both.
Right
now, again, it's early, but I want both, or at least have the choice. I mean, you can turn the sound off in this, but that's it. So yeah, that is weird.
Yeah, it would be interesting, and I'd like to have some discussion about this in the Discord. Maybe I'll post this later on. At what point do we think did the ST really hit its stride in terms of programmers really being able to take advantage? You know, how many years did it take before we were able to really, you know, most people were able to really get the most out of the ST? Interesting to find out.
I feel bad, sort of bad for coming down this because it was 87. But I mean, just taking the year out of it, just as the game, it doesn't do much for me.
I did look this up on eBay. It's funnily enough, this was packaged after the fact on I believe to be a budget release by Imagine Software. This was actually this was what was known as the 520 STFM summer promotion disc, Aaron. Enduro Racer was packaged with one of your favorites, Slap Fight.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man.
All on the same disc. Okay, I know which one I'd rather be playing.
Well,
this sold.
Have you played Slap Fight on here?
No,
you may change your mind.
Okay,
we'll find out.
Yeah, but anyway, this sold for the princely sum of $15.84. So there are copies of Enduro Racer out there. There are some listed right now on eBay for various prices. This is an easy game to find if you are an ST collector.
There you go, Boat.
All right.
Again, I wouldn't call this disappointing, but I would call it not exciting.
Yes. And with that, Aaron, we leave Enduro Racer. And we want to, of course, thank all the fine folks that brought this show to you this month. Our patrons, in particular, Game Selection Committee members Richard Davey and Dave Velociraptor. We also have a team of folks that support the ST Show on Patreon. Dave Cavalieri, Control Alt Reese, O'Brien's Retro and Vintage, Laurent Giroux, Olivier Massoud, Tim Drew, Retro Jerry, and Bernard Quinn. If you'd like to support the Atari ST Show, you can go over to patreon.com/Atari ST Show. We do have a goal up there. If we can get to $200 a month in Patreon support, the Atari ST Show will go from a monthly show to a weekly show, and that would be super awesome. If you like the Atari ST Show and you want to hear more, feel free to check out our other shows, Amigos, Everything Amiga, Our Sinclair, An American Take on the ZX Spectrum, The Coco Show, Gaming on the Tandy Color Computer, 1200XL, The Atari 8-Bit Show, and ARG Presents, where Aaron and the Brent spin the wheel and make the deal. All of these shows can be found on the Amigos Retro Gaming YouTube channel or at anchor.fm/Amigos Podcast. And now, Aaron, it's time for the big reveal. What are we going to be playing next time on the Atari ST Show?
Let's find out, Bode. Oh, man. Now I'm excited. Star Trek The Rebel Universe. That sounds awesome, Bo.
Yeah.
I wonder what kind of game that is. I don't know about that one.
No idea.
It's the original cast, too. Beauty.
That's right. That's right. So we will find out all about it, and we'll tell you all about it next time. But until then, thank you so much for listening, and make sure you play
your Atari today.